Welcome to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang, your intel on the Philippine markets and the economy. In the headlines, unemployment rate in April rose to 4.1% with over 2 million Filipinos without jobs. The country's gross international reserves rose to $105.5 billion by the end of May. And as the Trump administration seeks out the best offer from trading partners this week ahead of the July 8 deadline, should the Philippines rethink its negotiating strategy? Former tariff commissioner and senior economist George Manzano joins us for his insights. The Philippines' gross international reserves rose to $105.5 billion in May, according to preliminary data from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. That is up from the $105.3 billion in April. The Bangko Sentral says this level is enough to cover over 7 months' worth of imports and nearly 4 times the country's short-term external debt. The increase was driven by higher gold prices, the Bangko Central's investment income, and the national government's foreign currency deposits. More Filipinos were unemployed in April compared to the previous month, according to the Philippine Statistics Authority. The unemployment rose to over 4% in April from 3.9% in March, translating to about 2.06 million individuals. This was higher than the number of unemployed persons in April 2024 at 2 million. Meanwhile, underemployment in April also rose to 14.6% from 13.4% in March, translating to 7.09 million individuals. The country's employment rate for April inched lower at 95.9% from 96% in March, with the services industry still the top employing sector, accounting for nearly 62%. Overseas, U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping spoke for more than an hour Thursday in a sign of potential thaw in U.S.-China relations. Speaking for the first time since January 17, Trump and Xi agreed for more cooperation to break the impasse over tariffs and global supplies of rare earth minerals. Top officials from Beijing and Washington will meet in the coming days for more talks. Trump initiated the call after both countries accused each other of violating the tariff deal that they struck in Geneva. At the White House on Thursday, Trump said he was invited to return to China after visiting the country during his first term in 2017.
I think we have everything. I think we're in very good shape with China and the trade deal. We have a deal with China, as you know, but we were straightening out some of the points, having to do mostly with rare earth, magnets, and some other things. By the way, he invited me to China, and I invited him here. We've both accepted.
If Trump is starting to make peace with Xi, he is escalating his feud with the world's richest man and one-time ally, Elon Musk. Musk launched a series of tweets criticizing Trump's spending bill, arguing that it would raise the deficit. But his beef with the president mushroomed into who deserved more credit for Trump's re-election victory and why Musk did not cover his black eye during his last Oval Office appearance. In the end, the Tesla CEO claimed that documents involving sex offender Jeffrey Epstein weren't released because there were references on Trump. For his part, the president threatened to cut billions of dollars in contracts with Musk's companies. At the White House, Trump expressed disappointment for the man who financed his stunning political comeback last year.
Look, Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we're well anymore. I was surprised because you were here. Everybody in this room practically was here as we had a wonderful send-off. He said wonderful things about me, but I'm very disappointed in Elon. I've helped Elon a lot.
This pat caused Tesla's shares in the Nasdaq to plunge by 14% at the close of Thursday's trading, the company's biggest one-day slide on record. For the past 5 sessions, Tesla has already shed over $237 billion in market value. The feud between Trump and Musk sent U.S. equities tumbling this Thursday. The Dow falling by 0.25%, S&P 500 declined by over 0.5%, and the Nasdaq slid for about 0.8%. The U.S. 10-year Treasury yields inched up to 4.39%, while gold prices retreated to $3,350 per troy ounce. A new report from precious metals consultancy Metals Focus forecasts gold's average annual price will hit an all-time high this year by 35%. Let's take a look at U.S. futures, see how they're trading ahead of the market open later tonight, Manila time. Dow is up about 0.25%, S&P 500 up 0.1%, but the Nasdaq falls by less than 0.1%. And Asian markets are up in the first hour of trading after Xi's and Trump's talk. Australia's ASX 200 there gaining about 0.1%, but Japan's Nikkei 225 has climbed over 0.5%. South Korea Kospi is closed for trading for Memorial Day. Well, the Philippine Stock Exchange ended Thursday's session lower by less than 0.1% despite benign inflation print. The Philippine peso closed yesterday, Thursday, stronger at 55.62 to the dollar. The markets are closed today for Eid al-Adha, or the Feast of Sacrifice. Trading resumes on Monday, June 9th. Administration seeks out the best offer from trading partners this week ahead of the self-imposed July 8 deadline. Filipino economists weigh in on how the Philippines can best negotiate with the interests of Filipinos in mind. Trade negotiations with the U.S. are continuing, says Trade Secretary Cristina Roque, following a report saying Washington wanted trading partners to submit their best offers this week. Earlier this week, Ibon Foundation's Executive Director, Sunny Africa, told me on this program the Philippines trade negotiators ought to reset the narrative, serving Filipinos first.
And since 2008, 2009, they've actually been increasing their protectionist measures. So it's not just a Trump thing. It has actually been building up in the U.S. for the last, well, basically 4 administrations now. And I think that is shaking things up. We're seeing a more siloed world, a more compartmentalized world. And the Philippines still, clings on to this vain hope that just simply opening up the foreign investment in foreign goods will be what will work for us. We just say the U.S. sees that opening up the foreign investment in foreign goods hasn't worked for them. If the world's biggest economic power doesn't think that helps them, it seems weird that the Philippines thinks that that same sort of, old school free market thinking is what we need. So we really need some sort of a resetting, I think, of our economic policies.
With us now for more from Davao is former Tariff Commissioner and Senior Economist George Manzano. Good to see you, George. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Cathy.
So what do you make of what Sunny said there? He's basically saying protect our domestic economy first, exactly what the U.S. is doing for its own.
Well, we have to look at it in light of the reciprocal tariffs of President Trump that has created really quite a stir in the world economy. It changed basically our perception and our expectations of the role of the United States in the world trading system. For many years, Asian societies have grown rich through exporting to the U.S. Now, because of the reciprocal tariffs policy, we're seeing that the United States is now signaling to the world that it is no longer wants to be, quote unquote, the consumer of the last resort. And this has forced a rethinking of not only the Philippines, of all the actors in the world trading community on the approach. Is the U.S. still a reliable player? It once was. Will trade with the U.S. or trade in general will still drive economic growth and development? And what will happen to the supply chain? Is there a new paradigm when it comes to market access, where export markets are simply, access to export markets are simply a function of one's competitiveness or efficiency? Or does politics play now a major role, whether you're a friend or a foe of the powers that be. There are also changes in the technology war between China and the West, creating, basically cost for countries on whether what technology to adopt. So all of these things are coming up into the mess, no? And
It
so,
is. It's a huge mess.
yeah,
In fact, you say that it did, reset the whole understanding that we have of the global
yeah.
trade order. So how would you respond to the view that while opening up has advantages, I mean, if we've left domestic producers alone and not given them support, we won't be in a position to take advantage of that opening up.
Yes. Actually, we can look at it in at two levels. In the short-term level, I mean, I guess we cannot retaliate. We need to keep our trade channels open, and that we need to have, to be realistic on that the U.S. is still our biggest export market, and it is too big and too rich to lose. So I think our objective, short-term objective, is to continue to secure the market in whatever way we can. Maybe, and in the long term, we can start about looking for alternative markets, looking for cooperation measures with other bodies such as the EU or the RCEP in that respect. No? But in the meantime, and in the immediate timeline, we need to secure the U.S. market, and for that, we will have to articulate, no, and look at what's happening in Washington.
Right. We'll pick up on that, the articulation and also securing the market, and for who? And it better be the Filipino people. We'll continue this discussion with George Manzano right after the break. Also coming up, Meralco customers may see higher power rates for the June billing period, so keep it here in One News. Welcome back to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. Filipino consumers grew more pessimistic in the first quarter of the year, mainly because of rising prices, lower income, and fewer job opportunities. That is according to the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas' latest consumer expectation survey. Results show the Consumer Confidence Index fell to 13% in the first quarter from 11% in the previous quarter. Short-term sentiment also fell into the negative at 0.5%. but expectations remain hopeful for the next 12 months. In response to this, the Bangko Sentral reaffirmed its commitment to keeping inflation in check. The Japan Credit Rating Agency has once again affirmed the Philippines' A- credit rating with a stable A outlook, citing strong economic growth and steady fiscal consolidation. JCR pointed to robust domestic demand, low external debt, and ample foreign reserves as key strengths. An A- rating signals the high confidence in the country's ability to pay debts, while a stable outlook means no changes are expected soon. The agency also noted progress in infrastructure, poverty reduction, and overall fiscal health. Meralco may hike rates for the June billing period because of higher transmission charges, driven by a possible uptick in the reserve market rates in the previous month. The power distributor says it is still waiting for the final supplier billings, but hopes flat generation charges will help cushion the impact on consumers. Transmission costs, including ancillary services, are passed on to households, but Meralco says it is aiming to keep overall rate changes minimal after last month's decline. Meantime, in the U.S., trade deficit narrowed sharply in April, with imports decreasing by the most on record. The trade gap contracted by a record 55.5% to $61.6 billion, the lowest level since September 2023. Data for March was revised to show the trade deficit having widened to an all-time high of $138.3 billion. In April, imports decreased by a record 16.3%, while exports rose slightly, up 3% from the previous month. We're joined again once by the former Tariff Commissioner and Senior Economist, George Manzano, live from Davao. Let's pick up on our conversation there on the domestic producers, George, because it is important that we do a Filipino-first narrative for our own sake and ensure that we know which domestic producers are able to withstand the competition from overseas. In this 90-day pause, which ones have you identified as the most competitive, those which will be resilient if and when those tariffs come through?
Well, the most resilient so far are those that have that are exempted. No? Basically, the semiconductor sector that we have, simply because they are really intertwined in the global value chain. At the same time, we also need to import because in this day and age of production network or fragmentation of production network, you need to import in order to export, because seldom do you see a country that produces 100% of the product. Now even iPhones and most electronic products, even transportation, use parts and components that they source from everywhere else. Now, for that to work, there should be freer flow of trade. At the same time, very efficient logistics. But that has to be counterbalanced, as we've seen in previous episodes of crisis like the COVID, of resiliencies, of having buffer stocks. No? So when it comes to with the U.S., I think we have an advantage when it comes to our semiconductors, which incidentally is one of the biggest or the major exports that we have.
It is, and it
to
is
the
indeed
United
exempt
States.
for now.
And
I mean,
it is
that
exempt
could
for now.
change, George. I mean, the exemptions could change with how we've seen how Trump's mind changes. But the baseline 10% is still in effect. And we've probably
Yes.
seen the impact of what 10% can do to our industries. Which have you seen are the most sensitive or maybe vulnerable industries so far in these 45 days?
I think in the sensitive industries, I can only talk about the characteristics of that product that will be most affected. The most affected products will be products that we export to the United States, for which the U.S. has also local production, right? And so coconut oil, they might not have coconuts, but it's also another factor is products that we export to the United States, for which the United States have substitutes for. So those kinds of products are very subject, are very sensitive to tariffs. Uh, and certain agricultural products that we export, for which there are other countries, perhaps like Ecuador or Latin America, that have even lower reciprocal tariffs than we do, that we will that that will compete with our products.
Yeah,
But
coconut oil, as
there's
you mentioned. I mean, Charlie
yeah.
Avila was just on this show of Coco Fed, and he did mention the challenges that we have internally here in the Philippines, focusing on the supply shortage alone and the low yields. But you did make a mention of diversification, and a lot of the economists we speak with say that is key. You've got the opportunity to liaise even more closely with the ASEAN, and there is also the pending EU free trade agreement. And also the
Yes.
CPTPP. I mean, we're back towards those acronyms now because, as you made a mention, this is the second phase that we have to liaise with the bigger partnerships we can make. So what's the
Yeah.
strategy there then? How do we move forward when we're now ready to talk partnerships?
Well, the strategy in partnership is to engage in cooperation with these other countries, and one of the linchpin cooperation there will be in terms of open and freer trade, as well as an open and freer investments, foreign direct investments. And so, if the U.S. will close its market, becomes more inward oriented, then basically we will have to look for alternative markets for the products that we produce, for products in which we have basically comparative advantage. And opening up to these alternative markets is, I guess, the logical next move, because we cannot rely on United States, depending on the mood of President Trump, of whether they will continue opening or closing. There's a lot of uncertainty that will crop up in the case of decisions in the United States administration. But more importantly, what we can do is to develop greater cooperation in terms of standards, in terms of tariff regime, in terms of regulation with these other bodies, because we would like to inject, or we would like to participate in the global value chains that they have. You know, we would like to have a demonstration effect that if we engage with value chains with these groups of countries, we can demonstrate that that you can produce products which are a lot cheaper than products with countries that try to close on with themselves. You know? And
Right.
in those so and in this manner, you can even uh, attract the United States to continue engaging with the world economic orders, and to establish also rules, because trading rules right now are, we know, in tatters. The World Trading Organization rules are tatters with the emergence of the reciprocal tariffs. But if you have a subset of countries large enough to consume, and large enough and diverse enough to produce parts and components, and have their own global value chain, then that will be, a way for us to to access, the mainstream economic routes
That's true.
in the
It's
world.
really good to be reminded that we do have those silver linings, even as you mentioned, global trade order is in tatters. Thank you so much, George, for your insights. Really appreciate it. George
Thank you.
Manjano joining us live from Davao. A multi-awarded musical is going to be staged here in Manila beginning today. Keep it here on One News. statement, the president says Eid al-Adha should be a reminder of how sacrifice can be a force for the common good. He adds that the feast is a window to embark on a journey toward a state of heart. Eid al-Adha observes Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son under Allah's command. But before Abraham could do so, Allah provided him with a ram to sacrifice in Ismail's place. From around the globe, in the Netherlands, 4 judges of the International Criminal Court got sanctions from the U.S. for issuing an arrest warrant against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and opened a case on alleged war crimes committed by U.S. troops in Afghanistan. U.S. State Secretary Marco Rubio accused the judges of engaging in the ICC's illegitimate actions targeting America and Israel. The U.S. did not ratify the Rome Statute that created the ICC. One of the judges sanctioned is Alapini Canso, who is among those handling the case against former President Rodrigo Duterte. The sanctions mark an escalation of Washington's animosity toward the court. In January, the U.S. House voted to punish the ICC for the Netanyahu arrest warrant, underscoring strong Republican support for the controversial prime minister. In the U.S., German Chancellor Friedrich Merz visited the Oval Office for a meeting with Trump, hoping to persuade the president to play a more active role in defending Ukraine. But Trump said Kiev may, quote, need to fight a little longer. After the meeting, Merz said he was extremely satisfied in talking with Trump, as they also discussed matters in trade and tariffs. But he admitted that it remains to be seen whether, how, and why Trump would decide to support a package for a larger sanction against Russia. And before we go, the hit musical Come From Away lands in Manila with a fresh Filipino-led creatives by GMG Productions and Stages Productions. Set in the aftermath of 9/11, it tells the true story of 7,000 airline passengers stranded in Gander, Newfoundland, highlighting the power of kindness and unity in times of crisis. Running from June 6 to 29 at the Samsung Performing Arts Theater, the production marks a milestone in celebrating Philippine theater. Tickets start at 900 pesos via Ticket World. And that is it for Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. Catch us again Monday, 9:30 a.m. here on One News. We're also streamed live on YouTube and on our Facebook channels. Have a great weekend ahead.